So today we are talking all about Panchakarma, which is super exciting. We've got the wonderful Sera Melini coming in to speak to us on Panchakarma. And as I mentioned before we hit record, Sarah's been on my podcast a few times before she was pregnant, then after she had, while she was pregnant, then after she had Baba. She's got Baba with her today. It's beautiful to be able to make these connections from across the globe in Ayurveda as well, which is great because we've stayed connected, and here she is speaking in the Ayurveda Alchemist program. And I really do appreciate you coming on, because when I was connecting with her through the like yesterday or the day before, she was like traveling from far and wide with her family, and then she had a big exam, and she's just a superwoman. So thank you so much. Really appreciate having you here. So today, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Panchakarma, and I'll be asking Sera a few questions, and you guys please ask questions as we go through the process. She's here to answer them all for you. She is very, what do you say? She's a Panchakarma specialist, basically. So let's, if you'd love to introduce yourself and just share a bit about your background in Ayurveda and Panchakarma to start with, Sera, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Can you try this? Can you try this? Can you try this? Yeah, so I started studying Ayurveda in 2012. I kind of found a book about it while I was in India. My friend went to the doctor, and I just was in the doctor's office, so I was reading about it. And then I come from a medical family, so I had been teaching and studying yoga for a really long time, and it was sort of like a natural. Why is my camera doing that? It's so weird. Am I moving back and forth for you guys too?
Yeah. It almost looks like you're pushing your chair back and forth, like you're on a rocking chair.
No, this is like some new setting on Zoom. Okay, well, hopefully it'll just stop doing it. Anyway, so yeah, so I, like practicing and teaching yoga. I don't know if anyone here is a yoga teacher, but you end up meeting people who have like physical ailments that like really can't be solved by the posture or by breath, and so it was sort of a natural transition point, I think, in addition to just like having a family who has been practicing medicine for many generations at this point. So so in 2012 I just started casually studying. I found a program in New York, and I would commute to New York. I was living in Philadelphia on the East Coast of the United States at the time, that school just like left me with a lot of questions, and so I went to India to work a kind of like intern or shadow a functioning Ayurvedic clinic, and for a couple months, and just really discovered that they couldn't even really communicate with me because my education was so paltry. Like we just didn't share the same language, so the questions I was asking like weren't really good questions. And that's what I realized. So then I went home and I found a 2-year school to go to, which I did. And then I graduated from that, and also found I had the same questions. Like, I don't understand how this works in practice. Like there was a lot of theory, and there wasn't a lot of Sanskrit. And that revealed itself to be a problem later. So then I went back to India to go to the exact same ashram to kind of shadow again, and discovered that I just really didn't have an education that could like sit where it was being practiced. We still really didn't. I had more vocabulary, but I didn't know what I was talking about, is what I learned. So I went home from that trip to India and found another program that's based in classical Ayurveda. They made me like learn Sanskrit before I could join, and we like went to so my whole education was like from these classical texts, as opposed to but from a textbook somebody wrote based on these texts, which is what I had kind of been exposed to before. And that program was like 2017 to 2020, and then I did a residency for 3 months at the end of that program, and then an internship with that same Ayurvedic Panchakarma space. And it was one of the, it just recently closed, but it was like it's one of the only places that's doing like classical Panchakarma in the US, with the exception of maybe Maharishi Ayurveda, which is in Iowa, which is like the kind of right below Canada. Yeah, and so that was like a really nice taste on like what Ayurveda is and what Ayurveda really can accomplish, and why sometimes Ayurveda doesn't work as it's practiced because it's not practiced according to these like traditional classic principles. And so that's kind of where my education and practice is. It's a classical clinical practice coming from these three major texts of Ayurveda called the Bruhat Trayi, which is the Charak Samhita, the Shashruta Samhita, that's the last one, and then the Ashtanga Hridayam is the second one that was kind of collated. And the Charak Samhita is like, most people see it as the foundational Ayurvedic text, and then what ends up happening is because the yugas of yoga are that like there is like the gold age essentially, and everyone is brilliant and everyone understands things and people can memorize like shlokas and shlokas of Sanskrit with no problem, and disease is like mostly mental and blah blah blah. And then the next yuga comes and the next age comes, people aren't remembering things as well, and so then there's the Ashtanga Hridayam was written, and Ashtanga Hridayam is a significantly condensed text. Like if you look at the Charak Samhita, like I have 13 volumes or something, and the Ashtanga Hridayam is 3. And the Sushruta Samhita is 3, although the books are thicker. So, and then there's subsequent texts that are written after that because each age, just like we experience now, like new problems come, new health issues come up as the age changes, or later on there is it's called the Ravana Samhita, and that's like where there is more alchemy and like the use of metals and precious stones and stuff like to consume, and this is because the plant matter was harder to come by, and also the disease conditions were more complicated than like a plant could manage alone. And so so it was really cool to be in that program because I discovered that Ayurveda had, just like anything, like has evolved over time based on the need of the population and what's available in the environment, which is very much what Ayurveda is. So that's kind of my long-winded story of the history of how I got here.
No, thank you. It's very interesting. And we actually did a podcast on is modernizing Ayurveda wrong, which I think was an interesting topic as well. Because we both, like you said, have come from allopathic medicine and modern era and how we can fit it into our modern world. But going back to Panchakarma, could you please explain to the ladies, first of all, what is Panchakarma? Like, what is sort of the loose translation of Panchakarma? What's the meaning behind it?
Sure. So Pancha means 5, and karma is actions. So it translates to the 5 actions or the 5 therapies, essentially. Because in Ayurveda, we think of karma more as therapy as opposed to like the philosophical comprehension or meaning of karma, which has more to do with action. So there are 2 methodologies of treatment in Ayurveda, and allopathy does this too, right? There's like Shamana Chikitsa, which is like pacifying treatment. And this is like the Ayurveda that you see in textbooks, like or like online, like what are the dosha quiz is helping you with Shamana Chikitsa, where it engages in like increases like and opposite balances. So if you're experiencing the qualities of Vata dosha, dryness, roughness, constipation, whatever, breaking hair, chipping nails, things like that, then you would want to consume the qualities that are opposite to the ones that you're physically experiencing. This is called Shamana Chikitsa. Shamana, like Shanti, comes from the same root. So it's like to pacify, to create peace. But then there's this other process called Shodhana. Shodhana is like a purification process. And it comes from a process that's very different in contrast to Shamana Chikitsa. It comes from this concept called Tadartakari Chikitsa. Tadartakari Chikitsa is like homeopathy in some ways, where you're overwhelming the system with sameness. So so essentially you're trying to flood out the dosha, because shamana chikitsa doesn't necessarily remove the problem, it quiets the problem for most of us. But if the problem is chronic, it means that it has moved deeper into the body and it's kind of created a home there. You're not going to balance it out. It has to be actually physically extracted. And that is what Shodhana is. It's a Tadarthakari Chikitsa, because it's also a little bit risky, because you are putting the body under a lot more stress to remove these impurities. I say that in quotation marks for those who are listening to the podcast, but you know, to remove the imbalance, because it cannot be balanced out with opposite qualities. It needs to be flooded out with sameness, essentially. And so those are the two concepts that we're working with in Ayurveda, is Shamana Chikitsa and Shodhana Chikitsa. So if we're moving into Shodhana, in this purification process, it's different than detox, because a detox usually is focusing on one organ, whereas Shodhana directly passes through all the tissues and all the major, they're called marmas, but like all the major marmas and all the major dhatus, the tissues of the body. It's a holistic, meaning like whole, WHOL, holistic approach to cleansing of the body, because Ayurveda doesn't really look at the body in terms of organ systems most of the time. It's more tissue systems, like lymphatic tissue, blood tissue, et cetera, et cetera. They're not a complete translation. So there are 5 methods of Panchakarma. There is the Nasya, which is like the nose treatment. There's Rakta Mokshan, which is bloodletting. There is Basti, which is enema. There is Varechana, which is like purgation downward, like kind of medical diarrhea, essentially. And then there is Vamana Chikitsa, which is the vomiting protocols. So Nasya, when you treat someone through with Nasya, through the nose, it's mostly for head diseases. So the nose is how you affect the head. So like if someone has chronic headaches or conjunctivitis, or I mean for conjunctivitis you use something else, but you know, if there's like head stuff, you go through the nose. If we're dealing with Kapha dosha, which lives above the rib cage, essentially in the upper body, you do Vamana, because the idea is that you're moving the dosha through its closest exit. You don't want to pull Kapha, which is like residing in the upper body, all the way down to eliminate it through the rectum, because then you're moving Kapha dosha, which is a toxin at that point, through all of these body systems, and it can create a problem, right? Because you're like, it would be like trying to fix your drain by moving it through all of the pipes in your house instead of to try and pull it out the closest exit. And so we move Kapha dosha out through Vamana, because Kapha lives in the upper body, and so the easiest exit is through the mouth. And Pitta lives in the stomach, so it's the GI tract. So we're trying to move the dosha down through its quickest location. And it's like the lower stomach in the small intestine. So we move it out through the rectum. And Vata lives in the colon. Its home site is the colon and the thighs. And so we move Vata. Basti is particularly unique because we move, because Basti is called uneka karma, which means that it can engage with more than one thing. So we can use Basti to treat Kapha and Pitta, but theoretically we're using Basti to treat Vata because of its location in the colon, and we move things out that way. And Rakta Mokshan, bloodletting, is to treat the Rakta, the blood tissue. And you'll do that. There's a couple methodologies. You can do that through like poking a hole, and then like there's like technical classical treatments, like you're supposed to use like a horn from a cow, et cetera, et cetera. But what you can do now is like, you know, those suction cups that you might use in Chinese medicine. So you'll like make a little mark, like a hole with a little, like the kind of pin, needle that you might use if you were doing like a diabetes test. So you like make a little mark or 3, and then you put the suction cup on top and you suction it, and the blood starts to pool. And then there's, of course, you can do the leeches as well. So those are the 3 methods or the 5 methods of Panchakarma and kind of when you might use them. And yeah, and there's an order to these things. So, technically it's called Panchakarma, but nobody has the money and the time to do all 5. It's so time consuming because, maybe a little higher. Because there are also processes of, so like if I'm gonna have Vamana, if I'm gonna do the Vamana Chikitsa, I can't like finish the vomiting therapy and the next day start the duration. There has to be an adapting process for the body. So if it took me 7 days to prepare and then have Vamana, then I need 14 days to do the next thing. So it's like 3 weeks per program, essentially, with Vamana and Virachan. Basti, you need just a smaller resting period, and with Nasya and the bloodletting, it's can you be quiet? With the bloodletting and the Nasya, you don't need as much time in between. So you have to think about the planning of the order, or you can really tax the body because it's a lot. It's a big process, Panchakarma.
Absolutely. And as Sera mentioned, like Panchakarma therapies and treatments obviously prescribe per individual person. And I know in Bali and places like that, their Panchakarma is quite different to when you go to India. And, it's a little bit more modern and for the Westerner and things like that. And generally their full Panchakarma will go for about 21 days over there, just because that's what most people can and will commit to. But you can have different lengths for the Panchakarma. And when they do it in, say, for instance, like One World at Bali, they will do it according to your dosha. And so they'll do, like, as you mentioned, the bloodletting with the leech therapy, but that would be more if like you're, if you've got more pitta dosha or skin disorders on the feet, whatever that might be that they're doing it for. So not necessarily going through every single step of the full Panchakarma of the 5 different therapies. And they also add in like the Abhyanga and all of the Shirodhara and all of these beautiful experiences along the way to help move, to help with the Rakta Dhatu, the Rasa Dhatu, which we talk about the tissue, so the lymphatic, the blood. So we know that those therapies can help with that. The Shirodhara is the oil on the head, and that helps to pacify the Vata dosha. So they prescribe those type of therapies according to what disease you're in for and what she can balance that at that point in time as well. Yes. Yeah, thank you. You're doing so well, Sera. You are really like super mom. She's done exams, traveled, got baby here, teaching, all the things. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions so far? Like, I know it's a lot. Yeah, Jackie's in there going, Any questions?
I'm just thinking about all the different therapies, and like, have any of you ladies done Panchakarma? Like, had any of the therapies, and what was the sort of the experience like? And
yeah, I've done Panchakarma. And it is quite an experience. However, I did it as an outpatient with full Panchakarma as an outpatient, which I don't think is the best way to experience it, because you really need to be doing nothing and completely unwinding and allowing all the therapies and the treatments to work without having to go home to family and things like that. But yeah, I've done a full one in an outpatient.
Did you do any particular one of those 5, or was it the whole?
Mine was because I was about to pitta, so it depends on what like you go in for. So it's treated as an individualized medicine. So I did do like the enemas, fasties, all of those type of things. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't do the vomiting. I didn't do the bloodletting either, because they don't really do bloodletting here in Australia. You won't find it much. But in Bali,
yeah, it's rare. It's rare. We were doing it at the clinic because my teacher had leeches. So, but leeches are you have to be very careful with them. So like when you're doing the Raktamokshan, the bloodletting with the leeches, they also basically have a Panchakarma. So you prep them. I think you put them, so they have to have a 40-day rest period between uses. You can't keep using them or they die. So it's like having fish, basically. So once they've had their 40-day rest, you can put them on whatever location you're trying to put them on. And so you'll prep them by making them kind of agitated. And I believe it's in mustard oil and turmeric mixture with a, or maybe the turmeric's later. I think it's a mustard oil combination. I don't remember the full compound at the moment, but it gets them kind of agitated, and then you'll pierce the skin, and then you'll kind of latch them to the skin, and you'll see them start to like get full. And then once they're full, they'll usually fall off, and then you put them in this like salt, turmeric, sesame oil mixture, and you make them vomit. They have to like throw up the blood that they've taken. And then what you do is you look at that blood and analyze it to see what doshas are present. You know, like sometimes the blood will come out black, and that lets you know that there's vata in the skin, or there's bubbles and there's vata in the skin, or it's like really bright or has a slimy. So anyway, this is kind of what we're doing with the Panchakarma in general. So, you know, like when we're doing Varechana, the purgation, the downward purgation between every motion, or like looking in the toilet, or asking the client to look in the toilet and like describe what they see, because the diarrhea process. Because we're trying to, there's also an order that things need to happen, or you move into the space called vyapat, which is like a mismanagement. So when I had vamana, the vomiting one, I had a vyapat, because like a mismanagement, which happens. This was when I was in India. And I realize now what had happened. So I had done 5 days of ghee consumption with, you know, so you every day for Vamana and Varechana, you'll have the oil massage, the Abhyanga, then you'll have Swedana, you'll go into the sweat box for a particular amount of time. Basically, you're only in the sweat box until sweat breaks on your forehead. So if you're of Pitta constitution, it could be 2 minutes, you know. A Kapha constitution will generally take a little bit longer, and Vata would take longer, but you don't want to exhaust them because sweat therapy is exhausting. So you might not force them to go until there is sweat. But basically what sweat tells you is that the channels are open. And so things can move, because if the channels are constricted, then there is a vyapa, because the things can't move through the body and they end up just staying in one place. So what you'll do for Vamana and Varechana, the vomiting and the purgation therapies, is you'll do 3 to 7 days of ghee consumption, and you're slowly increasing the quantity of ghee. And the reason for this is that ghee, and it's usually a medicated ghee, so it's not like just ghee from your counter. It's going to be, you know, like there is a Vahatikta Ghritam, which is like a very bitter ghee that's used for blood disorders and pitta disorders most of the time. Like skin disorders, it's very good for that too. You know, so there's like a ghee, there are millions of ghees. If you went online and looked and went ghee shopping, you would see there's all these different medicated ghees. So, and you'll slowly increase in quantity. And the idea essentially, and this is why it's called Tadartha Kari Chikitsa, the Panchakarma, because medicated with herbs, is because the ghee is like, ghee both stokes the fire of Agni, but as you increase the quantity, it is absorbing into the far tissues and starting to like pull out the dosha that's kind of hiding. It's called Lina dosha, the dosha that is hiding in the far tissues, like past the muscle tissue. So like the fat tissue, and the maja, the like, I don't know what you would call that, like the marrow, and the asti and the bone. So this is where like dosha tends to hide, right? And we can't pull that out through the GI tract, because you can't access those tissues through the GI tract. So we use ghee, and ghee starts to saturate the body. And you know that it's saturated because by the time you're done consuming the ghee, you're like, you see oil in your stool, the skin is shiny, there's shininess in the eyes, there's like a shininess on the tongue. The person is lethargic. They have what's called dvesha, like grita dvesha or sneha dvesha, which means like they like have a strong aversion, like they'll fight you, you know, like I will not take one more tablespoon of ghee, and you're like, aha, you were there, excellent. So yeah, so when you get to that point, what ends up also happening, and this is the irony, is that so ghee, grita, stimulates Agni, the digestive fire. But what we're also trying to do is slow it down to basically move the process backwards. Because what we do when we eat food is we eat food and it slowly metabolizes to become these tissues. And now we're eating all this ghee to like flood the dosha out of the tissues back to the GI tract. So we have to move it back to the GI tract to pull it out. We can't. So the actual purgation or the vomiting is like a very, very small part of Panchakarma if we're going this route, because if you don't pull the dosha out, if you don't consume enough ghee or you consume too much ghee, you create these problems where the dosha is not all in the digestive tract. Or in my case, what ended up happening is they gave me 5 days of ghee, I believe. It was a long time ago, but they gave me 5 days of ghee. And I'm assuming it's because I was a Westerner, they're like a little bit cautious, especially because vomit is the most dangerous one to do. Like if you have any heart conditions, you're not, you're ineligible for vomina. This is like in the classical text too. This is not just like modern anxiety, because it puts pressure on the heart. So anyway, they gave me this one concoction of like licorice and milk to cause vomiting, but this is a really weak formula, and they gave me a lot of it, but it doesn't like pull dosha from the deep tissue. So when you're doing vamana, you're usually, it's really complicated. This is why no one does it, because so I've seen my teacher do it. Like it's like this one, and now this one, and this one, and they're throwing up into a bucket, because you want to make sure that the quantity of the volume of liquid that you're drinking is now what you're throwing up. Or you'll have what happened to me, which is the ghee brought all the dosha to my upper body, and especially to my head. I had vomina because I had a thyroid disorder, and I was trying to treat hypothyroidism with vomina. But the herbal concoction that I was consuming to make me vomit wasn't as strong as the dosha that was brought to my head, and it all didn't go out, and they didn't measure it. And so they gave me more of this weaker substance. And so I was vomiting for like 15 hours, not really. It was probably like an entire day. I was throwing up like from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. And vomina shouldn't last more than an hour. And so what I ended up vomiting started to become foam. So when you're reading these classical texts, they'll tell you what you're supposed to look for to know when the process is complete. And foam is too far. So I should have pulled out kapha and then pitta and then stopped. Or I think it's kapha. I think it's pitta and then kapha and then you stop. And then with Varechana, it's vata and then pitta and then kapha, or maybe it's the reverse of that last one, and then you stop. And if you go any further, you create a vyapat. So what ended up happening is that from this moment, I started having really intense migraines because I have kapha dosha that was brought out by the ghee stuck in my head, because the substance I was taking to bring it out wasn't strong enough to pull all the dosha that was there. And it basically, like you can think about, like you take butter and you put it on your counter and it's really hot and it melts, and then you put it back in the freezer, and whatever shape it was in on your counter is now how it's frozen. And so that's basically what happened. They opened up my body, they brought all the dosha to my head, and then they didn't remove it, and then it froze. So now I have migraines. I mean, it's improved over time, but you know, I had that vomina in 2015, and it took me until like 2021 to really manage these migraines. And so that's and that's why it's Tadarthakari Chikitsa, because it's roulette, you know. You want to make sure that you're working with someone who knows what they're doing. And this is why in those places, like Harmony was mentioning, they'll do these like Panchakarma lights, because people want to experience Panchakarma, but like it's intense. And you know, I've had clients who are like coming to do Panchakarma, but then they're thinking of it like a retreat, and I have to be like, this is not going to be like a retreat. Like the massage is going to be super nice, but like you're going to be shitting your brains out. Like that is not relaxing.
And it's another reason why Panchakarma is an Ayurvedic specialty, and why you go see a Panchakarma specialist, an Ayurvedic doctor, to really do it properly. And you need to be closely monitored, because you can imagine your electrolyte balance, your blood sugars, everything is becoming very unstable whilst we're trying to find that equilibrium, that homeostasis in the body. So there's always, at a proper Panchakarma center, there's always a doctor there, like an Ayurvedic doctor. But you have to be monitored very closely, because if you're vomiting a lot, or if you're treating the wrong dosha, or if you're like shitting your brains out, like Sarah said, yeah.
Can I ask a question there with that? Like, you might have said this before, but is it expensive to do something like this? And is it available?
It is expensive, and it is available. It's expensive because like they do target to the Westerners if you are going to a Panchakarma center, like a retreat center, because it is very nice. I was meant to go to India in 2020 and then 2021 for Panchakarma in Kerala, which would have been a very different experience to what I've experienced, because they do it more. It's such a like from an Ayurvedic perspective in India, Ayurveda is a medical therapy. So it's not like you go down, you get your modest little tea towel and dress down for your nice little massage. Like back in the day, it'd be just a wooden bed. They'd throw you on there for your abhyanga. You'd have two people doing the abhyanga. You'd be stark naked. Like it's very different traditionally how it was done for their culture than it is done now for our culture as well, like so that we can experience it as Westerners. So when you go to Bali, you can do it, but it's very much, they have Ayurvedic doctors, they do all the therapies, like I said, the bloodletting, the vomiting, all of that, but it's very, very nice, a really nice way to do it. And it is quite expensive, although a lot cheaper in Bali than if you were to find somewhere here. There's no, that I know of, there's no in-person center here. Everyone does outpatient Panchakarma. There in Bali, it's charged in US dollars, and One World Ayurveda is one of the best one, and Sukhavati. So that's, yeah, I mean, there's an option. We can go, if everyone wants, we can go to Kerala and do an Indian one.
Yeah.
We could all go to One Worlds as well, go to Bali. So that's where I was last year when I was or was it this year that I went? No, it was this year. Anyway, Mel's got a question, and then I've got a few more questions for Sarah before she gets tied up with Bobby.
You kind of just answered a bit of my question anyway, because I was just going back to when Sarah was saying when it's a chronic issue, we can't do it by, and I'm going to botch up the words, but you can't do it with the shama, the like increases, like and decreases. So when we're getting a client, like I've got a client at the moment, she suffers chronic headaches. I've just put her through a cleanse, and her headaches is getting a little bit better, but the migraines are still there. So that's something that we can't really help her with, because we're not Panchakarma specialists. So where could we, or how can we as holistic health coaches help them or guide them to go and see a specialist? Because you said there's not one here in person. So how could we help? And then I've got a second question, but that's my first.
I personally think taking a collaborative approach is how I like, an integrative and collaborative approach. So, she high migraines, is that hormonal migraines? Is it high histamine? Like, do we need to look at her, her diet from that perspective as well? But the nausea, like daily nausea, would be one of the treatments that you could prescribe to her. Yeah. And then there's things that does have herbs it's just called Migraine Care, but there's like a tablet that can help, a herbal tablet that can help with those sort of things. But Sarah, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so I think so this is just like theoretically, like technically, because Ayurveda's goal is to remove the problem and not like continuously be treating it. But the reality of life is that like not everyone has time to do Panchakarma, not everyone has the money to do Panchakarma, not everyone cares to do Panchakarma. And so, as holistic health practitioners, you're not going to tell them to go away, like it's just that you can't promise them it will stop forever, but it can be managed. And so this is also something that like when we're looking at things classically, we're like analyzing, is this person like what's their sadyata, what's their treatability? Is it sukha sadhya, easy to treat, right? Like they just started getting migraines like 3 weeks ago because they had like an overexposure to sun and they got really dehydrated, or they were traveling a lot and they just had migraines continuously, but it's only just started. So that's like sukha sadhya, like it hasn't been around very long. It was caused by one event. And so like easy to treat, you can do that with like opposite qualities. And then there's kritra sadhya, which is like difficult to treat, but still treatable. So like, you know, if those people could have like 2 variation of protocols and then do nasya or something, then perhaps like the headaches would go away. And like maybe they've been around for like a couple of years and they come with menstrual cycle or something like that. So that's kritra sadhya. So still treatable, but only under these circumstances, like only if they have panchakarma is it like treatable, meaning like it will go away and they'll never remember, they'll never buy Tylenol again, kind of thing. And then there's yapya, which means untreatable. And untreatable could be that like it's too far gone, or like they can't do panchakarma or don't want to do panchakarma. And so like we treat it like it's yapya, which doesn't mean you send them away. It just means that like you're treating them and you will be treating them for this, and it will improve. Like my thyroid condition improved. I don't have a thyroid condition anymore, and I did that mostly with herbs and like one variation, you know. So but like I know that it could come back. That's basically, and then there's this 4th one, which is like asadhya, which is like untreatable. And again, it doesn't mean you send those people away. It just means that you will be consistently managing it. And so like as a practitioner, you just want to know like what are your expectations as a practitioner so that you're not making false promises essentially. And you don't have to word it that way either, because it's really disappointing, you know. But you just like, you know, in your head, like, oh, this is gonna be kritra sadhya, like this isn't gonna get better unless I do this. They don't want to do this, but that's okay. I can still do these processes. They'll just have to be stricter with their diets. They'll have to take more herbs for maybe longer, etc. That's all. That's kind of what you really want to think about as a practitioner in those conditions.
All right, perfect. And I can see Harmony put in the chat, take into account the 6 stages of disease. So awesome. Thank you, guys. And my last question was, before I let you get back to it, you were talking about the blood, and when they do the bloodletting, they're able to have a look at the color of blood to kind of diagnose as to what what doshas are coming out. Could you do that also to get an idea with women's menstrual cycles? Because I know sometimes when I bleed, my blood's a lot darker, and then other times it's quite bright red. So if we're working with the client, you know, we look at their tongue, we ask about their poops, can we ask about their blood? Would that be able to help us as a tool?
Oh, for sure. And you definitely should, you know, like ask them what the volume is. Yep. And with the urine, like all of these qualities are in. That's why we want to look at the mala, the waste of the body, because it's telling you what came before. How is the process going that produced this mala? So like some women don't produce, right? They have amenorrhea. Like why, right? What is happening? What is the cause? Is it obstruction? Is it dryness, right? Is it kapha? Is it vata, etc.? Like, is it clotted? Is it dark? Is it scanty? Is it like for 7 days? Is it painful? You know, so all of these things will tell you something, you know. Or are they spotting? Like, is it on? What's the cycle? How many days on? How many days off? Is it regular? Like all of these questions that you'll ask about the menstrual cycle will tell you the doshic predominance.
Awesome, thank you.
Amazing. So just a couple more things I'd love to go over with everybody, if you've got the time, Sarah, is just the different stages of Panchakarma. So where we just explaining something like with the Parivakarma, the preparatory phase, and then the Panchakarma phase, and then I guess relating it to the individual doshas. So sort of what like a treatment protocol would look like for the doshas if you're not going to be doing the full like 5 therapies. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So and this is a really important point, because the the Purva Karma, the pre-treatments, and the Panchakarma, the post-treatments, these are more important in some ways than the treatments themselves. Because if we don't prepare the body, then the Panchakarma can't do it. You know, the treatments, the karmas can't do much. So one of the most important things we do at the beginning is we, it's called pachan. We do, which means like cooking, because you can't remove ama by like pulling it out. Ama by definition is like stuck. It has to be cooked, then pachan in its place. So you'll do herbs, you'll take herb.
Sorry, I'm just, if you're wondering why I keep writing in the chat, there's just we don't have a cohort that all starts necessarily together. So there's some more advanced Ayurvedic.
Oh, okay.
people
Sorry.
here. So why I'm putting up in the chat, I don't mean to distract you, but there's some people very new to Ayurveda in here as well. So sorry, keep going. I just wanted to let you know that in case you kept going, why is she just popping up with words?
Ama by definition means that which is uncooked. And so, you know, like from chronic indigestion or like chronic disease of any kind, ama kind of comes into the body, and it's often pushed deeper into the tissues, which is why there is this chronic disease most of the time. So you have to cook ama out. You can't like pull it out through your butt or throw it up, etc. So first you have to do pachan, where you get rid of any of the dosha that's like kind of easy to access, and you cook the ama out so that you can consume the ghee. Because if you don't have a strong digestive system, or you have ama, ghee is contraindicated, because ghee is very much like ama, like increases like. So if you're consuming ghee and you have poor digestion, it's going to make everything worse and not in the process of improving it. So that's essentially what we do at the beginning, is we will put the clients on really strict diet, like no alcohol, no sex, no weird sleeping patterns, like, you know, like you're on retreat kind of concept. And like really simple foods, really like, you know, redundant, dosha specific foods, essentially. And you'll do that for as long as it takes. You know, for some people you do it in 5 days, for some people you'll do it for 2 weeks. And, you know, ideally, like you're working with people long term so that you can, you know, by the time you're planning ahead, you know, it's like, let's say it's April and you're planning on doing Panchakarma in September. So you're doing Pachan this whole time so that you don't have to worry about it. So that they're like, because you know, it's like, you want to do as much in advance so that you can do more in the treatment. If you don't do more in advance, the treatment will only do so much, you know? So that's kind of our thinking. So those are the Purva karmas. And then we do the treatment itself, you know, it might be 5 days of ghee, and then 1 day of the vomiting, and 1 day off, and then 1 day of the vomiting or the purgation, or, you know, 5 to 7 days of nasya, or 3 to 7 days of the enemas, the bastis, etc. And then after we're moving into the post phase, the Panchakarma. And this is really important because your digestive system is really weak. You are really weak. Your digestive system is really weak. You're clean, you know, but you're weak. And so you need to slowly build the digestive capacity very slowly. So you'll, you know, if you've had a really, really intense experience, you will start with like soupy rice with no spices, you know, and then because cardamom or coriander is like too intense, you know. And so you really have to slowly build your Agni back before you know, eating anything more complicated, or because your body is so sensitive and so open, you know, if you mess stuff up right after you eat a donut, like, so there's a friend of mine who she's a practitioner, but she also has like, it's not super disciplined. So she did Vamana, I believe, and then she ate a donut like 3 days later. And she was doing these treatments because she had a fever disorder, and her fever disorder got so much worse because like a donut is so hard to digest. It was 3 days post-treatment. She knew better, right? But she did it anyway. And then she just immediately started getting these like this dwada, this fever condition back, and worse because your body is so sensitive, it like sucks what you consume into the furthest tissues. So and essentially it takes twice as long. So however long your treatment is, you want your time of recuperating to be equal to that time period, if not double. So if you do 5 days of PK, then you want to do minimum 5 days of like rebuilding Agni, or 10 days if you want to be safe. And this includes like alcohol and sex and exercise. When you do Basti, the enemas, it's a little bit less strict, but essentially, you know, that's what you want. So, and this is again why Panchakarma is hard to do, because it's not just about like what you're doing when you're getting it done. It's like at least a week before and at least a week after. So that's 3 weeks, you know, of your time that you're like not engaging in regular life. And this is also why it's really helpful to not do outpatient, because it's hard.
Yeah, I was just about to say that when you were saying, like, I was thinking about that as a time frame, and I'm like, wow, that's a long time to be like knocked around when you've got like a lot of life responsibilities.
Yeah.
So do you get people that then from all sort of stages in life and almost like taking that time off, like if you had to, from, you know, let's say having a small child, for example, like do you get like that kind of like mums that are trying to do this? Because I mean, I think it would be amazing, but it would probably be kind of hard to take the time off and, you know, be the most energized parent that you could be for that amount of time, you know?
That's what, outpatients is not ideal because, again, we know that our environment and our everyday work, what we're doing, can influence the dosha. So say you're treating vata dosha and you're going into like stressful situations with a kid and running around and doing all that, like you're only sort of like moving the needle so far because you're coming back constantly aggravating dosha. It's the same like if you're doing Panchakarma and it's like really cold and windy. And I mean, I did it, like this is so stupid, but I did Panchakarma and I was trying to get rid of a lot of the vata dosha and then went ice skating with my kids and then wondered why I started crying. Like just like it just moves so much in you. But that's why I think they do have like 14 days. They in Bali they do have 7-day options. I know that, so it's very quick one. They have 14-day options and the 21 days because, as Sarah's explaining, like to do it properly, it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
So just, I know you said that there's a lot, like obviously in Bali. So you were saying that there is some here in Australia, like nationally, like is there one in Melbourne, for example? Centre, or is it all outpatients?
Yeah, there's only a few that do it and it's outpatients. I don't know of an in-person center because you need to have the trained therapist. So people trained in Abhyanga, Shirodhara, like all of the therapies as well, which is really challenging here to find people that are actually trained in all of that to do a proper Panchakarma. I was talking to, she's actually a medical doctor, she's an Indian lady, and she wanted to open a Panchakarma therapy center here. And we were in talks about it, but it didn't happen because it's a
really a lot of red tape and not enough people.
What about where you are, Sarah?
There is some here. The place where I work was doing the full, you could be inpatient in person or you could commute, and we would often send people home with food, so they still weren't cooking, they were just like sleeping somewhere else. But actually my classmate, she's originally from Australia and she's moving to New Zealand in August, so she's going to be opening a center in New Zealand. I think she's going to Kerry. So I don't know if she's going to still call it East West Ayurveda. That's what it's called here, but she's amazing. And the thing that's cool also is that like you can do Basti, the enemas, and like go home. It's not, it's very, very effective. And it's like, when in doubt, you do Basti because there's just like a lot less for the client to have to deal with. You give them their food, you give them their plan, and they just come and you remove the dosha and then they go home. And it's like, they're not going to have so much energy. So it's not like you're not really concerned that they're going to mess it up. Whereas with the ghee consumption, like the client could mess it up in the process and like, then you really have to deal with it. So, and the nasya you can do outpatient, the rakta mokshan you do like in a day. You don't need prep. There's no Panchakarma for that really. So, yeah. So anyway, my friend is going to be opening a space in New Zealand. and Carrie. So, and she's incredible. She's been studying yoga, Ayurveda for like over 20 years. And she graduated from in class with me. She's wonderful. She's a trained massage therapist, and
Beautiful.
she can do it all. So that is an option, but it's also more expensive in the West because like you have to like the amount, it's not as easy to procure like nice sesame oil, like, like you need vats and you need storage. And like in India, the plants are growing, the center where I was studying, like the plants were just like growing on the property. So it wasn't like they just shipped them in. They like made their own medicines there. So it's like way cheaper. Whereas here, like we're buying things in bottles this big and then like, it's just, and then you have to pay, the wage of the place where you're living, and the standard of living in India is different than the United States and Australia. And so therefore things just end up costing more. So that's why the clinic where I was trained just went out of business because the costs were too high.
Okay.
Yeah, I was running like Ayurvedic cleanses and doing a few of those therapies. So, and like enemas, you can do enemas at home. Like I would teach the clients to do this, the busties themselves, oil busties, whatever it needed to be, medicated busties. I didn't have a sweat box, but I had a sauna. So we'd do some like Swedna, which is the sweat therapy, the Abhyanga. So sort of like very modified Panchakarma nausea, obviously you can do quite easily. But yeah, I don't know of a in-person one here, but that's
And
interesting.
is it quite like to get a Panchakarma, to be a Panchakarma like practitioner or medicine or doctor, is that quite a long study?
I mean, yeah, you go, Sarah.
Go ahead.
No, you go. You've done more Panchakarma than I have.
Not necessarily. Like you need people who are trained. It's kind of like a medical assistant. Like they need to be trained in the treatment style, but once you know it, like you need to know how to do it, how to make it, how to administer it, when to ask for help, like what issues look like, have some basic capacity to adjust, to like manage, and then like know when to call the Vaidya in, basically.
Does anyone else have any questions? I'm just being very mindful of Sarah's time because I know it gets about witching hour with little kids, doesn't it?
Yeah.
5 p.m. for you. So I don't want to keep you too long. But does anyone have any more questions about the process, or are you all like, what is Panchakarma? Because I know there's a few people here are quite new to Ayurveda and you're just jumping right in the deep end. Jackie, yeah, you've got another.
I just had a question just about how it relates to like Ayurvedic cleanses. So is an Ayurvedic cleanse a kind of
baby form, very baby form?
Yeah, because I was just thinking like, okay, like even with the ghee and yeah, like there was just a few things there, and I was like, we do ghee in the Ayurvedic cleanse, and yeah, I think I just got a bit confused about where does the Ayurvedic cleansing process sort of sit in.
The cleansing process, the Ayurvedic cleansing process is different. Like Panchakarma's the, what do you say, the Hail Mary, like the gold standard, the most hardcore sort of treatment option. The cleanse is, it's a mind-body cleanse. We do the ghee to dislodge the armor, like that is part of the theory of it, but it's a very soft process compared to the Panchakarma. And we can chat more about that because we're going to be doing a group cleanse at the end of August, I think it's scheduled for, and talk about that in there as well.
Nice.
Yeah, amazing. Anyone else have any questions before Sarah goes? No? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You've had such a busy week, so I do really appreciate your time, and it's been really insightful listening to you. You're always full of wisdom, so thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and don't be intimidated. It's just a lot of information, but like you should try it. You should definitely try Panchakarma.
And
it's very cool.
What are you up to these days with your practice, Sarah? Where can the girls?
I'm seeing clients mostly online, some in person, but I'm also going back to school to become a physician's assistant. So, because I just want like a more comprehensive training so that when I'm seeing clients, I can be a little bit more, so I know how things are interacting. And yeah, so that's the direction I'm heading. So that's why I'm in a statistics class now.
Well, best of luck with it all. And yeah,
Thank you
so much. When you want to come back on the podcast, just give me a holler.
I will, absolutely. It was really nice to meet you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Alrighty. Yeah, it's
That
a
was
big,
so interesting. That was a bit of a like of mind, like
I
wow.
loved it.
it's a big,
I
it's a
really
big,
loved it.
big topic. And I know, especially for the ones that have sort of just started this year, it's like, yeah, Panchakarma is a really big topic because it's like the top sort of treatment protocol and method, and the Ayurvedic cleanses, Jackie, are based off of Panchakarma, like the theory behind it. And yes, technically the ghee, the oleation, which we call it internal or external oleation, would happen before the actual Panchakarma therapy. But because the cleanses are only, say, 7 days, whatnot, and the first part, maybe 3 days of just eating healthy, that's not really when you want to start the ghee, because in Panchakarma, you'd be starting the ghee after already, like, remember the Purvakarma, the prep phase can go for weeks, getting off alcohol, sugars, all that. Then they start the oleation phase, which is the ghee. Whereas if you've at least done a bit of Purvakarma in a cleanse where you're just eating healthy and taking away the gluten, the refined sugars, all of those type of things, and then start the oleation with more of the cleansing diet, it's okay. You're not doing all of the therapies either, but you are so welcome to do like a busty, which isn't the enema. So you can buy your own enema bags online. I do them at home myself.
How often would you suggest to do it? Like, I've never done one, but when you said that, I was like, oh, this sounds like something that I'd like to try, because
Yeah, I was
obviously
going to ask
other
a bit
therapies were
about
like maybe too intense. And when you said it's something that you can do at home and that you were administering them for like, you were prescribing them for clients, I was just like, oh, that might be a thing. Because the only other thing that I notice when I do a cleanse or when I take clients through cleanses is they get backed up. And even myself, I get a bit like constipated. So I'm like, what is that about? Because aren't we meant to be,
it's
moving stuff?
generally they're not eating as much food either, so they're not eating food and fiber and stuff like that, and maybe not as hydrated. But you can definitely, like, I don't know if you've heard of Nulax. Nulax is like, it's got senna in it, which is like a herb, and it's like a fruit bar. It's a laxative, essentially. You can get it from the pharmacy, but it's like a natural sort of one, and often put the cleanse clients on that. But if they are sort of not eating as much, they're not going to have as much to go through the body as well. With the basti, you're going to be treating the basti more for the vata doshas though. So remember, it's always in Ayurveda is all about individualized medicine. So about what you're treating them for. So if there's a lot of kapha going on, as Sera mentioned, kapha, the seat of kapha, I don't know if you remember from the dosha module, but the seat of kapha is like the lungs, it's the upper body. So you're not going to be doing basti, which is going up your butt, to treat the kapha, whereas vata is the seat of vata is the colon. So that's why it treats vata so well, doing the busties coming out that way.
And when you say do it yourself at home, like, that sounds pretty disgusting.
Just get it up there, Michelle.
Look, it's awkward, but I'm a nurse, so like I've done plenty of this.
So is it, I mean, I don't have a weak stomach, don't get me wrong, but like, how gross is it? And is it better off going to get one done if you haven't had one before, like Jackie and I, for example?
We can go together. Michelle.
It's not gross. I'd actually almost prefer to do it at home because I don't want people shoving stuff up my butt. I'd like you get the bag. You can get them online. So a disposable enema bag. you can also get ones that you sterilize yourself. And the other reason why bloodletting isn't done a lot here in Australia is because of the sterilization. Like, you have to have a proper sterilization process to be able to sterilize the cups if you're doing it in like the suction cupping as she was talking about, or like leech farming would be a whole different issue. And I'm not really up with having leeches crawling all around, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Or walk in the bush and you'll
yeah,
get some
just
leeches on you.
yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, with the bags, like, you do need to find somewhere to hook them, like a door or something to hook them. You need to prime the line, so make sure you've got all the oil down the line, and then you just roll over onto your left side, and then you lubricate the end, and then you've got to relax because you don't want your butt like going, oh, this is so awkward, this is so weird, because it'll just clench down, right? You've got to relax, you've got to breathe, deep breath in, pop it in, then unclamp it, allow the oil to come, laying on your side, and then you can roll on your back, and just you don't want to expel it straight away. So you want to hold it in the rectum, the colon, for a period of time, because olating, it's oleation of the vata area, the colon. So we're using sesame oil. You can, if we ever say in Ayurveda medicated oil, it just means like with a herb that is a herb that's suitable to your dosha, so whatever that might be for you. And then I always say get period pads and put them in your undies, because you can leak a little bit of oil. So I would always do it later. Go and then like hold it as long as you can, basically. And then if you go to the toilet, you can let the oil out. But then I would suggest having like a pad in your undies, because it can get a little bit leaky. Yeah, so just like
So
you know,
all the oil goes
Does it
in,
make you
you just
poop?
get to hold it and then just shit it all out, kind of thing.
yeah, but it's only going in the colon. So the colon's the end, like it's not going right up there. So it's just
Okay.
sitting in the colon and nourishing the colon. Yeah, it does make you poop, Jackie. Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It should make you poop. But the other purgation is having certain herbs that make you poo yourself, like constantly poo yourself. So that's more for the pitta one, where
Yeah,
you
that's what I'm going to ask that. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And then the vomiting one, herbs that make you vomit. I mean, you can actually do really salty water to make yourself vomit as well.
Oh, me, I'll just smell tequila and I'll bleh.
Oh, really? Yeah, or you could do that. Yeah, sniff
Yeah.
tequila. So yeah, I just really wanted to expose you guys to what Panchakarma is and the in-depth processes that there are in Ayurvedic medicine for certain conditions like this, and what cleansing is essentially mimicking. An Ayurvedic cleanse is mimicking Panchakarma, but very, very diluted down. So yeah, so when we're going through the cleanse process, we're like, oh, this is hard, just like
Think about
Panchakarma
that.
is.
I want
And
the
so what you
busty.
did just
I'm
there
like,
with-
can we get the busty on the cleanse?
Yeah, you can absolutely do the busty on the cleanse, and I do, but my busties when I'm cleansing, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I do that, but I think mine's packed in storage, so if I'm not back in the new house, then I won't have my kit with me. Might have to order another one.
And
but
just so really quickly, you said about the pitta then. So with the pitta, you want to like get like you cleanse yourself out, like poop yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so the bloodletting's more of a pitta release as well, because it's releasing heat, and remember, pitta is more dominant. It's closely related to the rakta dhatu, which is the blood. So rakta letting, bloodletting, and releasing heat. Pitta is heat, and we release heat through the blood. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so interesting. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, there's so much to it. But yeah, that's just a very like more of a hardcore process with Ayurveda.
Yeah.
But it is very worth experiencing a Panchakarma. It does, when we talk about ama being toxins, obviously we have physical toxins in our body, but we can also produce that mental, emotional ama. So when you're doing a Panchakarma, a lot of emotional release will come out as well. And also you're opening yourself up. You're working on, like she mentioned, the mama points, which are correlate with the nadis, and that's equivalent to TCM meridian. So everything is starting to open, energy's flowing, and it is a process for sure.
Imagine. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Because with the pitta one, then is it the same process? So is it still like the disposable enema bag? But if you do have more of a pitta dosha, would you just naturally then, from doing the oil, would you naturally kind of go to the toilet afterwards, just because or would it need to be? Yeah.
Possibly, but they usually give you a certain herbal medication.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you wouldn't do that at home?
Yeah, you can do that at home. You can take some laxatives and or herbs that do that for you, for sure. And don't forget, like it's never maybe just one dosha. Sometimes if you're going to have Panchakarma, depending on the state of disease you have, according to the 6 stages of disease with Ayurveda as well, you might be having to treat all 3 doshas. You might be having to treat 2 doshas. So it's not just like, oh, I'm more vata, so I'm just going to treat the vata. There might be underlining pitta going on. There could be tridoshic, so all 3. And that's usually when people are at that stage, they're needing like a full treatment, a full Panchakarma therapy, which is the 5 therapies, which treats all of the doshas.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I've got to run because I've just got an appointment. So
lovely to see you.
Yeah, so we'll definitely catch up soon. That was awesome. Loved it. Loved all the poo talk.
Yeah.
I already feel cleansed just talking about it. So
yeah, gotta go cleanse it out now.
Yeah.
You can get senna tea leaves, like little, and you can just make a herbal tea with, and that's quite good, that you can, tell your clients if you're wanting to flush them out as well.
So I find that a few of the clients that I've had, they all seem to have like that vata imbalance, like the constipation and
a lot of the time that happens in the cleansing. So it is good to introduce the senna tea and stuff like that, even if they are pitta kapha. That can really happen because we're slowing down the agni, slowing down the digestive system and everything like that. So
I think when they think cleanse, they think that things are going to be coming out the other end, and it's like. And I was just like, is it just me? Because even I find like I'm quite regular, but when I cleanse, it's like sometimes it's a couple of days, and I'm like, that's not normal for me. And
And I also, like when I give to my clients, if I take them through a cleanse, with the booklet I give them, I put that like what to expect. So when they do get to that cleansing stage and they're not passing it regularly, they know, okay, this is normal, and this is why it's happening. So maybe just give that heads up when you're going through this is what you can experience as well.
Yeah, no, that's
and
good
there's
to know.
Herb called cascara. I'm just seeing if I could. Cascara, that is also a natural laxative that you can use as well.
But should we be forced, like, giving these extra things, or should we just let the body do its own natural process? Like, is it?
I tell them to take, because you don't want them to be blocked up, because you're trying to let the toxins out. So when people are constipated, the toxins are reabsorbed. So you do want to be able to flush it out, and you can give them the options. You can say, if you're feeling constipated, you can go and get the Nulax, you can try the Cascara, you can try the Senna tea, whatever you need to loosen.
I've done a bit of reading on like the Ayurvedic cleanse process. Like they recommend things like psyllium husk and things like that. I'm like, how effective is that? I guess because
it can be really effective.
Yeah.
Again, individualized medicine. So you just have to allow the clients to see what works well for them. Like if they are receptive generally to more of a loose bowel, then that might work really well. If they've got more vata and they've got constipation issues already, they're going to need something a bit more
stronger.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. That's good. All right, girls, I got to run, but I'll
I got to go too. Thanks, guys. That was great. Thanks, Harmony. It's always awesome.